and we will seek to bring every nation into the expanding circle of development. Earlier this year, the President proposed a 50% increase in U.S. development assistance. But he made clear that the terms were not the old terms. He says that the new resources will only be available to countries that work to govern justly. That invest in the health and education of their people, and that encourage economic liberty. We know from experience that corruption, bad policies, and bad practices can make aid money worse than useless. In such environments, aid props up bad policies, chases out investment, and perpetuates misery. We're not going back down that road again. Good policy attracts private capital and expands trade. In a sound policy environment, development aid is a catalyst, not a crutch. At the core of America's foreign policy, then, is our resolve to stand on the side of men and women in every nation who stand for what the President has called the non-negotiable demands of human dignity, free speech. Equal justice, respect for women, religious tolerance, and limits on the power of the state. These principles are universal, and President Bush has made them part of the debate. In regions where many thought that merely to raise them was imprudent or impossible. From Cairo and Ramallah to Tehran and Tashkent. The President has made clear that values must be a vital part of our relationships with other countries. In our development aid, our diplomacy, our international broadcasting, and our educational assistance. The United States will promote moderation, tolerance, and human rights. And we look forward to one day standing up for these aspirations in a free and unified Iraq. We must simply reject the condescending view that freedom will not grow in the soil of the Middle East or the Persian Gulf, or that Muslims somehow do not share in the desire to be free. The celebrations that we saw on the streets of Kabul last year proved otherwise. And in a recent United Nations report, a panel of 30 Arab intellectuals recognized that for their nations to fully join in the progress of our times, they will have to have greater political and economic freedom. The empowerment of women, and better and more modern education. We don't seek to impose our forms of democracy on others. We seek to create conditions in which people can claim a freer future for themselves. We recognize there is no one-size-fits-all. Our vision of the future is not one where every person eats Big Macs and drinks Coke, or where every nation has a bicameral legislature of 535 members, or a judiciary that follows the principles of Marbury versus Madison. Germany and Indonesia and Japan and South Korea and Taiwan and Turkey and South Africa. Have all shown that freedom can manifest itself differently around the globe, and that new liberties can find an honored place amidst ancient traditions. In countries like Bahrain, Jordan, Morocco, and Qatar, reform is taking shape according to local circumstances. And in Afghanistan this year, a traditional Loya Jirga assembly was the vehicle. For creating the most broadly representative government in Afghan history. And because of our own history, the United States knows to be patient and to be humble. Change, even if it is for the better, is often difficult, and progress is sometimes slow. To be truthful, we Americans have not always lived up to our own high standards in this regard. When the Founding Fathers said, "We, the people," they didn't mean me. My ancestors were 3/5 of a man. But slowly, but surely we have become an America that more properly and more completely reflects the great aspirations that the Founding Fathers held. We know from that experience that democracy is hard work. And 226 years later, we still get up every day and we practice. And we work at it, and brick by brick we get closer to the American ideal. We have the ability to forge a 21st century that lives up to our hopes and not down to our fears, but only if we go about this work with purpose and with moral clarity. Only if we are unwavering in our refusal to live in a world governed by terror and chaos. And only if we are unwilling to ignore growing dangers from aggressive tyrants and deadly technologies. If we are persistent and patient in exercising our influence in the world. We will serve not only our ideals, but many beyond our shores. And we will truly deserve the tradition and the legacy of Americans who have stood for freedom. For justice for many decades. Thank you very, very much. Condoleezza Rice. Opening statement to the 9/11 Commission. Delivered April 8, 2004, Washington, D. C. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I thank the Commission for arranging this special session. I thank you for helping us to find a way to meet the nation's need to learn all that we can about the September 11th attacks. While preserving important constitutional principles. The Commission, and those who appear before it, have a vital charge. We owe it to those that we lost, and to their loved ones, and to our country. To learn all that we can about that tragic day, and the events that led to it. Many of the families of the victims are here today. And I want to thank them for their contributions to this Commission's work. The terrorist threat to our nation did not emerge on September 11, 2001. Long before that day, radical. Freedom-hating terrorists declared war on America and on the civilized world. The attack on the Marine barracks in Lebanon in 1983. The hijacking of the Achille Lauro in 1985. The rise of Al-Qaeda and the bombing of the World Trade Center in 1993. The attacks on American installations in Saudi Arabia in 1995 and 1996. The East Africa Embassy bombings of 1998. The attack on the USS Cole in 2000. These and other atrocities were part of a sustained systematic campaign to spread devastation and chaos and to murder innocent Americans. The terrorists were at war with us, but we were not yet at war with them. For more than 20 years, the terrorist threat gathered. And America's response across several administrations of both parties was insufficient. Historically, democratic societies have been slow to react to gathering threats. Tending instead to wait to confront threats until they are too dangerous to ignore, or until it is too late. Despite the sinking of the Lusitania in 1915 and continued German harassment of American shipping, the United States did not enter the First World War until 2 years later. Despite Nazi Germany's repeated violations of the Versailles Treaty and provocations throughout the mid-1930s. The Western democracies did not take action until 1939. The U.S. government did not act against the growing threat from Imperial Japan until it became all too evident at Pearl Harbor. And, tragically, for all the language of war spoken before September 11. This country simply was not on war footing. Since then, America has been at war. And under President Bush's leadership, we will remain at war until the terrorist threat to our nation is ended. The world has changed so much that it is hard to remember what our lives were like before that day. But I do want to describe some of the actions that were taken by the administration prior to September 11. After President Bush was elected, we were briefed by the Clinton administration on many national security issues during the transition. The President-elect and I were briefed by George Tenet on terrorism and on the Al-Qaeda network. Members of Sandy Berger's NSC. National Security Council staff briefed me. Along with other members of the National Security Team on counterterrorism and Al-Qaeda. This briefing lasted for about an hour, and it reviewed the Clinton administration's counterterrorism approach. And the various counterterrorism activities then underway. Sandy and I personally discussed a variety of other topics. Including North Korea, Iraq, the Middle East, and the Balkans. Because of these briefings and because we had watched the rise of Al-Qaeda over many years. We understood that the network posed a serious threat to the United States. We wanted to ensure that there was no respite in the fight against Al-Qaeda. On an operational level, therefore, we decided immediately to continue to pursue the Clinton administration's covert action authorities and other efforts to fight the network. President Bush retained George Tenet as Director of Central Intelligence. And Louis Freeh remained the Director of the FBI. And I took the unusual step of retaining Dick Clark and the entire Clinton administration's counterterrorism team on the NSC staff. I knew Dick Clark to be an expert in his field, as well as an experienced crisis manager. Our goal was to ensure continuity of operations while we developed new policies. At the beginning of the administration, President Bush revived the practice of meeting with the Director of Central Intelligence almost every day in the Oval Office meetings which I attended. along with the Vice President and the Chief of Staff. At these meetings, the President received up-to-date intelligence. And asked questions of his most senior intelligence officials. From January 20 through September 10, the President received at these daily meetings more than 40 briefing items on Al-Qaeda. And 13 of those were in response to questions he or his top advisors posed. In addition to seeing DCI Tenet almost every morning, I generally spoke by telephone to coordinate policy at 7. With Secretaries Powell and Rumsfeld on a variety of topics. And I also met and spoke regularly with the DCI about Al-Qaeda and terrorism.